All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Anne Elizabeth Moore. Anne is an artist.
Hello.
Hello! Anne is an artist and author, the founding editor of Best American Comics, former editor of Punk Planet, professor at the Art Institute of Chicago, the founder of Ladydrawers, the author of several books, Unmarketable, Cambodian Girl, New Girl Law, all types of amazing stuff, all of which and more you can find at AnneElizabethMoore.com. And thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, absolutely. It's a blast.
All right, so Anne, what I want to talk about today is the Ladydrawers, and we have talked about them before, including you. You're one of them. We've had this conversation before, but in case people aren't really familiar, it's been a while since I think we talked about Ladydrawers on the show. Can you just give us a story of what exactly are the Ladydrawers? I know people can check them out at Truth Out, but tell everybody all about the Ladydrawers and how badass they are.
Yeah, completely. And so Ladydrawers is a loose collective of mostly comics interested folks with a range of racial and gender and sexual identities that are really interested in looking at comics as a medium of expression, researching them, and then presenting our findings in comics, mostly in comics form. And so we've done a range of projects, many of them actual comics, including our monthly strip at Truth Out. But we've also done, we went on a road trip to go deliver sex ed books to Todd Aiken and drew comics about that. And then we just ended up putting on a big art exhibition in Chicago over the summer called Sex, Money, Race, Gender, that really looked at a wide range of different kinds of cultural production that address issues of sexuality, gender identities, and how this sort of works in our economy in a really fun and hopeful, enthusiastic environment. So basically we do a lot of stuff that's really, really hard and talks about racial and economic injustice and gender injustice in as funny a way as we can.
Yeah, and the initial. I remember the initial thing you guys did was actually the initial kind of drawings were kind of stemmed from kind of sexism and gender issues in the comics industry itself. That was kind of where this all stemmed from, correct?
Yeah, and that's really the beginning year, maybe year and a half of the Truth Out comic was entirely about looking at comics as sort of one form of cultural production and trying to pinpoint where, at the time, really, gender issues and sexuality came in and were influencing the content as well as the labor issues within comics. Once we got those, solved, and it really was about when we start a series of investigations, it's sort of like, let's go on a hunt for Bigfoot. And we found Bigfoot, excuse my French. and then it was like, okay, well, we can stop. We're out here in the middle of the woods, we can just stop looking for anything, or we can just sort of poke around and see what else is relevant. And so from there we really moved into more of a direction of thinking about how gender and race and economics play into larger issues of cultural production. So media in general, but then right now, where the Truth Out strip is going is actually into sort of international labor issues around women's rights to participate in culture and the economy. And it's really, really exciting.
Yeah, and the thing you're launching now is you're actually launching a year-long investigation into an issue that I know you've been covering and working on for as long as I've known you, which is fashion and garment workers and all of that. So tell about the new thing that's kicking off now, which is a year-long work called Fast Fashion.
Yeah, so I'm switching up a couple of things about the way that the strip works. One of them is that we're working with particular artists for longer. So we'll be working with each artist for a series of 3 strips. And then we're really developing the entire year of strips into a single narrative that is comics-based that will actually trace how women's labor works around the globe. And so we started, the first one just came out at the beginning of this month, called Fast Fashion with Julia Gaffer. And she's one of my favorite living artists, so it's really exciting to be able to work with her. And we're starting to trace the production line of fast fashion, which is an incredibly influential economic force in the world. Americans in particular buy an average of 68 garments a year and 7 pairs of shoes. So we're really looking at, this is sort of the face of fast fashion, but then we're going to be tracing the production line of fast fashion back to, the garment factories, for example, in Cambodia, where I've spent a decent amount of time, and then looking at other labor issues that affect women in developing nations. And then we move into questions of the sex industry and human trafficking and, looking at how gender and sex actually play out within international economies.
Discuss a little what let's because the first strip is out, and what I love about this, the art is always so cool. I mean, you really get some of the coolest artists to work on this stuff. Kind of describe what you guys found for the first strip of Fast Fashion. What's the first things you actually the first facts that you guys uncovered? I mean, you've been covering this stuff for a while, but you decided to cover in the first strip.
Yeah, so the very first one really tries to set up the idea of fast fashion, which I think that people who are interested at all in, economies and labor issues know what the term means, but a lot of people don't. We know what fast food is because everyone's embraced the term, and we can go to a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Taco Bell and we can have some fast food. But we haven't really looked at how fast fashion is both a reflection of that, in terms of it's an incredibly influential mode of production for the way that we appear, the clothes that we wear every day. And that's what that strip attempts to do, is set up this understanding that most of what we wear and purchase right now is fast fashion. And the reason that term applies isn't just because it's a cute reference to fast food. It's a really intense speed up of labor, which is what the next couple of strips are going to be showing. And so what the first strip really does is it explains how the multi-fiber agreement in the mid-1970s actually
74.
Established...
Yeah.
74, yeah, thank you. Established sort of a global program for getting developing nations up to speed on, in many cases, like joining the WTO, but more directly, like this idea of participating in the global economy through through entering the garment industry. And what that meant was that, production of clothing was moving offshore. And so things like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that really galvanized the labor movement here in the U.S. around women's right to participate in the economy.
Just to talk about the fire that was in Bangladesh.
Well, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened in New York 104 years ago. But
all right.
The factory fire that happened then just a couple of years ago in Bangladesh actually killed the same number of people, but it didn't affect Americans in the same way. It didn't affect Europeans in the same way. It sort of tipped off a couple opinion writers to the idea that maybe we should actually be concerned about global labor issues, but it didn't change anything. Mm-hmm. And that's, the multi-fiber agreement really sort of allowed for that to happen in its most negative sense, but also, it did do some really interesting things for these local economies. And so we were just, that first strip was really just introducing people to how fast fashion works and how common it is. It's in every, H&M, Forever 21, Zara, all of these, Benetton, these are all using these same production modes.